You know, I can't stress enough the importance of what you just heard about communication and when it's effective or not effective. And we're clearly at a juncture right now in the history of how we communicate with each other that has everyone in a turmoil, and no one really knows what the next phase of communication that works will be. The old environmentalism was mainly focused around communicating that there's a crisis, something, and that you regulate or litigate, and it kind of tamps down and goes away. This is a new kind of problem, as you heard a lot from David Orr and others yesterday, where the norms that underpin the climate problem, the technological norms, the 150, 200-year history of fossil fuels is not something that is as easy to regulate as a sort of an old-fashioned pollution problem. The old ideas of bad guys, good guys, you know, the great investigative old-fashioned journalism that I have done a lot of is not as applicable in an issue where we're all, you know, by some ways of looking at it, we're all the villains. You know, Exxon pumps oil, not because it's just something they do. They do it to serve society in some way or other. You know, I have a Prius, but it still has to be filled up with gasoline. And I have a minivan because sometimes we have to move a lot of stuff around, and it's not the most efficient vehicle in the world, but it's still necessary. So we're all locked in, we're all bad guys. So what do you do then? How do you communicate that story? Where's the big gotcha there? So, and that comes, and now we have this fire hose of information that we're all inundated with on climate. It's an absolute fire hose, and in my blog, I'm trying the best I can to keep up and synthesize and filter and put up the stuff that matters, that I think is most applicable to the key question that I'm confronting, which isn't how do we solve climate. The key question of my blog is how do we head toward roughly 9 billion people on a finite planet and not screw up completely? That is my daily quest. What combination of resilience, policy, education, personal action, intergovernmental action like climate treaties, what's the best mix there that's most likely to get us through with the fewest regrets? And again, limiting climate risk is one of those big ones. Right now, I was sitting in the back room here for an hour just now, fine-tuning a post that should be up. It might even actually be up now. Let's see. If my editors, see, we all work 7 days a week now. My editor has to work 7 days a week. I have to work 7 days a week. And there it is. That wasn't there. That wasn't there 10 minutes ago. And this includes a quote from Herman Daly's speech this morning. I love the... But this is a post that will aggravate some people, and the print story that comes with it tomorrow will probably aggravate some people, including some of my good, long-standing friends in the environmental community, because what it says is that some of the sexier ways to communicate about global warming, the tipping points phrase, for example, are almost impossible to apply in this case with climate, with sufficient precision to justify that use of terminology. In fact, when you add up, when you look at the recent papers in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, there were 2 papers the last year, really tried hard. What do we really know about, you know, what can happen with Arctic sea ice? What can happen with the deglaciation of Antarctica and Greenland? What can happen with the Amazon? Is it going to turn to desert or not? When you look at each of those specific examples, the error bars expand tremendously. The complexity is real. It's not manufactured by the Cato Institute, as in some cases happens. And so what you end up with is back to the same boring message that science has been hammering to us since the IPCC got created in 1988 and since I started writing about this issue, which is more emissions equals more risk. So you take all those tipping point-ish things and you look at them, agglomerate them, and you end up with the same message. The message of the IPCC that's been kind of criticized lately for being too conservative. But the bottom line is that that's the reality of this issue. More emissions, more accumulating greenhouse gases, more accumulating CO2 with its direct chemical impacts means more risk. The other, Peter Tanz is in this piece from NOAA up in Colorado, and he says, it's much more like Russian roulette than like the other ways this thing has been played out. Of course, the gun is not pointed directly at us, it's at our grandchildren. So what do you do? How do you act in the face of that kind of implicit uncertainty? And how do you communicate that in a way that's going to change, given our norms as a species? And our norms as a species, as anyone in this room knows, are today, not tomorrow, not somewhere else. Global warming, the latest science still says, despite what we know about changes that are underway in our climate here, it says that the changes that are most likely to be disruptive to societies in the near term are not here. They're in places like sub-Saharan Africa, the parts of the Middle East, Bangladesh. So it's a somewhere thing. And then it is still a someday thing. As you know, we've had a cold winter, and the long-term trends are toward a lot of warming, sustained warming, no new normal climate. That's kind of, to me, that gets my attention, no new normal climate, no new normal sea level. But when you get into these fights about, is it going to be 3 feet of sea level rise in this century, or 2 or 6, that's where that fight can actually be distraction. So, and again, there's a discussion in here, both the sea ice in the Arctic and the deglaciation question related to Greenland and Antarctica. And if everyone is trying to make the argument based on what we know about those ice sheets, they're in trouble, because there's complexity there, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And again, it's not imaginary, it's not like concocted. Instead of saying, we're talking about Russian roulette. And I know there are problems with talking about Russian roulette, because it's kind of immediately takes it away from the kind of engagement that some people feel is necessary to